Hey everybody, it's been a moon or two. I was thinking about that. Gee, I don't do these very often. Why don't you do these more often? Well, I think I don't do these too often because um, well, I'm very busy and I say something when I've got something to say. And I've got I think, sort of an odd thing to throw at you. A sort of, it surprised me. So, trying to figure out a way to get here. The We're living in strange times. Let's put it that way. Why don't we start with that? That should be relatively benign. We're living in really strange times. We're living in really dark times. And a lot of people, I think, are kind of confused and looking around. And this is not to get into politics, but politics, I think, is downstream of culture, is what's of zeitgeist, of what's going on the street and what the word is. And culture, good luck, really, it's like a slippery fish. You catch it, but then it slips away. You can't seem to keep it. It's always moving. And I've had a couple experiences or a couple thoughts, and then I've sort of put them into practice. And I feel like it's given me this little window on something bigger. And my window, because I'm a musical person, it's an odd, out of the way sort of approach to this problem. But I think maybe I'm hitting something a little bigger. All right, what am I talking about? What am I talking about? Trying to diagnose, what's wrong? Why is the culture so bad? And I don't want to make this some generational thing. Let's take that off, because it's painting with such a wide brush, and there's no generation to blame. It's that people of many generations over the course of decades, so that when each decade, several generations all sort of blew it at the same time, and then the next 10 years, and some of the same groups of people, and then some people disappeared, and new people showed up, and they were blowing it too. So there's plenty of blame to go around. But, I remember hearing since I was a kid about the dumbing down of America, right? And I think some of it was true, and some of it we sort of poo-pooed as being a reactionary or just... But now, some of the things that people were really worried about, say in the 90s, I remember Carl Sagan talking about it. Demon Haunted World, I think, is the book in which he goes into some detail about it, where he really could see what was coming, or the nightmare he thought could be coming, and that was happened. And a lot of it comes down to us being lobotomized by the phones. I love the technology, and I love technology. I'm not. Now, if we only lived in caves, everything would be better. No, no. But it's not technology is a problem. It's the very extremes of the technology. That's when you can get into a problem and maybe need to come back a little bit from that. It's not necessarily a new idea. Let me throw this one at you. Besides social media and whether it's Facebook or TikTok, or it's really doom scrolling and everything that goes with it. And people sitting there going, well, people just don't know, and people just aren't this, and people just don't. And I could give you a couple examples. There's a great movie from 40-something years ago, named Being There. It was one of the last movies Peter Sellers did, and in Being There, it was a Jerzy Kosinski novella. The character, Chance the gardener. Chance the gardener is a person with a very limited mental capacity. This is a person um, who's never left his home, probably because he was, disabled in some way, from a cognitive point of view. And um, all he knows is that he's lived in this home and he's tended the garden in this house. But he's, through a series of accidents, he leaves the home, and of course becomes the uh, chief economic advisor to the President of the United States. It's spectacular. And throughout the film, he's telling people, he's very clear, he never hides anything to people, and they simply misinterpret him and decide he's saying something he isn't saying. At one point, he's given a chance to do a book, and he says to the publishing companies, "I can't read." The publishing company says, "We know, no one has time. No one reads, no one writes, we know, but we'll get you the best ghostwriters." So this sort of idea is not new. I'll give you a more recent one. There was a reboot of Battlestar Galactica in the early 2000s. Really well-written show. I think it was Ron Moore did all that. And Edward James Olmos was in there. They had some pretty good actors. A lot of newbies too. But it was an okay show. But one of the cool things about the show is the idea is that it's the AI thing we're talking about now, right? The AI becomes sentient and becomes robotified and becomes a separate species and rebels against the humans. And there's been all these wars. And when the humans are finally destroyed, the only ship that survives is the ship that doesn't have, that's the old one that they were going to put in the mothballs, because everything has been everything's networked. Everything's on a networked computer. Everything's on a net, some version of the net. And essentially the bad guys are able to get a virus into the system and turn the system down. And the only humans that survive are ones on the old ship that doesn't have any of that, because it was never optimized for that. It's just an old thing that's got analog parts. And so by virtue of the fact that they're not modern and they don't have the best technology is why they survive it. It's a really neat idea. And then whenever anyone says to Edward James Olmos' character, "Well, we could upgrade some of our stuff here. We still have enough tech that we could do it." And he goes, "No." Very adamant about, no, that's what the whole reason we're around is because we're actually a little retro. So these are cool ideas. How does that come to now? I've been thinking, I guess like so many folks are thinking, right? What can we do to turn all this disastrous culture around? And it's going to sound, I think the fastest way isn't a political solution. It's deciding to read. This is an interesting thing too. If you suggest this, how wonderful the experience of reading is. I saw this on an online forum where someone suggested reading was wonderful, and they were immediately attacked quite hard. I think it was Threads or Twitter, or one of those. Was when Twitter was Twitter, but I think it probably was a Threads thread. But this person got attacked because there was a pushback by people who say, well, there are folks who have attention deficit issues and reasons why they cannot read in such a way. And how wrong of you, how ableist of you to say reading is important when they could be using audiobooks. It was another one of those, somebody misinterpreting something. It was someone making a differentiation in a qualitative experience and thinking they were making a judgment call, that they were making a value judgment, when they were just speaking of the difference in a qualitative experience. And this poor person couldn't, no matter what they said, know how terrible and ableist they were. I remember the time going, oh my, no, 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 folks. They're just saying reading is, you know, would seem a very natural and okay thing to say. Here's the if they were making an ableist art, okay, then that would be okay. Maybe there would have been a point, but they actually weren't. If you do the research actually on a thing like reading, and there is a qualitative difference, right, between someone reading and someone being read to, right? But they've done studies. Studies have been done, and neuroscience people have the same parts of the brain are activated, whether you're reading it yourself or whether it's being read to you. Which sort of makes sense too, because if you've ever, my son's in college, so I know he's going through classes like this, and I remember it very well. It hasn't changed that much. As much as it's changed, some things remain very much the same. You go to a lecture, you're in a big hall full of a lot of people, and they are essentially reading to you, or at least speaking to you, right? You're still either being read to, you're being spoken to, you're still getting the knowledge. And then the reading is a backup so that you can understand, okay, but you're still taking in the information. Oh, it's fine. So you certainly can take in the information other than doing the good old-fashioned reading. However, I'm going to go back to the qualitative experience part, and I'm going to lean into that just a little bit. And again, for people who have attention issues and and can't have that experience, then they can't, and that's fine, and they can get information plenty of other ways. It's fine, but I think that's outside the scope of the point I'm trying to make here. What I'm trying to get across is, and I think there are other experiences that you could have that would do this as well. It's not only reading that would do this, but reading's one example of it. When you're reading, right, it's usually fairly, if it's at its best, I'm guessing, I guess that's my opinion, it's a time when things are quiet and you're concentrating, and the author's voice in your voice is in your head. That is kind of a wonderful experience. And it's a sort of meditative experience. Again, something that we're missing, we don't get enough of. That you can go there and have quiet time to think on some subjects. And that a bit of concentration, a bit of time to just think and get into something without distractions, even if it's 20 minutes, half an hour, whatever it is, that experience is missing from people's lives. Most people don't have that. So we are increasingly we're not well read. We're increasingly choosing to make ourselves less literate. Maybe not illiterate, but certainly less literate. That's a real problem. That's a real problem. I've always read a lot, but I think these days I'm reading more than ever. It's rather voracious. And I'm realizing, whenever I'm not reading, and then I get into reading again, I realize, why did you ever pause? It's so good for you. So having but purely interior, in just any kind of contact with intellect is just good. If more of us were doing that, I think a lot of the fog that's descended over the culture would start to dissipate a bit. There's nothing like education. There's nothing like an engaged intellect. So that was this has been crossing my mind. And then something else happened. As you probably know, right, I'm a musical person. And actually, I just had a piece released. I'm doing a series of pieces. That's the next one that's coming. And I managed to get the piece out to some good old-fashioned radio. And just, you never know who's going to pick it up or who isn't, but a few, wonderful. A guy in Belgium is going to be playing my tune on his station. Great. FM radio, good old-fashioned radio out of Belgium. Awesome. It just did get played just this past weekend in pieces called Levitation. You could find out on most of the platforms. Not Spotify, because I don't like Spotify. No, I'm not interested in helping them accrue more funds. But it's like you can find it through Amazon. You can find it through Apple. Anyway, under my name, you could find it. It's on AmpWall. That's the other. That's the Bandcamp alternative I found. Anyway, in the course of this, a college radio station out at University of California, Davis, got a hold of me and said, "We like the track." I said, "Oh, great. I'm so happy. That's great." And they said, "But it's a policy of the station that we only use physical media." I was like, wow. I didn't think I'd need any. I didn't make any up. But I was like, you know what? For the University of California, Davis, I'll get some made up. And I ordered some, a very tiny run, just so I could send them a CD. And I did. And it was fun to make the little package. Something I hadn't planned to do. I did it in an afternoon, less than an afternoon. I mean, it really didn't take long. I knew I was going to need a picture anyway, because I was going to need it for all the platforms. And I had that. But anyway, I put this thing together and I sent it out to them. So that was fun. And then I started to think about how fun it is and how much I like good old-fashioned physical media. And I started thinking about, my wife was asking me, "Oh, holidays are coming. What am I going to get you?" I'm like, "Oh, I don't know, the man who has everything sort of thing, right? And it's the same for her. I don't know what what am I going to do?" Anyway, so I'm thinking about, then I got an idea. I started thinking about old school stereo systems, like the kinds that every house had. Like when I was growing up, you had your TV, sure, but every house had a really not every house, but I would say a majority had a big, separate pieces, rack, stereo system, big speakers. They were great. They had view meters. And that continued right through CDs. It was a phono player, so you could play records, and tape decks, and CD player, and receiver. And I remember how much I liked gear, and it's all gone. There's no gear, right? And I'm like, I've been railing for years that I thought that, streaming has killed so much of music. They took away the fact that it was something tactile, that was something you could hold on to, something that you could own, that you weren't renting music. That the idea of having a record and having a CD, smaller, but now all of music was just an icon, on your phone. Just totally took something I loved so much and just turned it into nothing. And so I started thinking to myself, you know what I'd like? I'd like components. I want stereo equipment. Can it even be found? Yeah, it's not a breeze, but yeah, you could find it. And lo and behold, so surprised, a lot of the equipment, not all of it, some of it's still the same garbage it always was, and you really look back at it. But you could get, really for pretty good price, you could definitely get better speakers than you ever used to be able to. Powered or passive, it doesn't matter. You can get good speakers. You can get a half decent receiver, fine. I'm trying not to make this super expensive, pardon me, for my wife. I don't. So I'm sitting there going, okay, I need a record player. Yeah, oh, you can get those. I mean, not the cheapy ones. There's like plastic crap that you can. No. I know a real decent turntable. Okay, it's a couple $100, but you could get a half decent turntable. Fine. You need a receiver. You need a pair of speakers. I'm like, oh, I need a CD player. I'm like, wait a minute. I keep a lot of old tech. I must have some CD player somewhere. And I went searching around and rooting around in all my storage stuff. And sure enough, I found a couple of them. One of them that will connect perfectly to a receiver. Still had this thing, cleaned it up. And what I did, just to test it out, because I was like, good, I could save, there's one component she doesn't have to get. I connected it to some speakers here, old school CD player. And I started taking out some CDs, because I've kept everything. I have all the tunes. And started playing it on this thing. And it's hard to describe how much better that is. Even better not being, here's the thing, better not necessarily being sound quality. You could stream from your phone to a good set of speakers and all of that. Lossless, right? It's really not about high fidelity. And it's not about audiophile crap. I always worried about audiophiles because almost every good musician I know never had a great stereo system. They had crappy junk because they're musicians, they didn't have any money. Audiophiles tend to care more about the equipment than the music that's being played on the equipment. And accuse me of being a sweeping generalization if you want, but that has been my experience. So, I know what a good sound is. Look, those things behind me, I just did this piece and when I finished it and mastered it and was all done, I put it in my car, right? It's the classic thing that you do. Does it sound good in the car? It sounds good in the car on regular audio equipment. And here's the note, does it sound good in the car? Does it sound exactly the same as it sounded out of those two things? Does it sound exactly the same? If it does, you were successful. And it did. So, all good. Life is good. Anyway, I started spinning discs. And again, the sound quality was very, very good. But it wasn't so much about the sound quality as in stopping. The music wasn't background music. I stopped. I didn't do anything else. I had to remove the CD. I had to put it in the tray. There were liner notes, something to read, something to hold. Every album has a story. It's not just a graphic of what the cover art was. That's tiny. It's not devalued. In fact, now it's filled up with value. So it seems that's, I think, the experience that the owner has. And you know what? It feels good. And I think there have been basically 2 generations at this point that never went to the record store and never had their own collection. And I think if there's any kind of renaissance, that we've gone as far as we can with the social media and the TikTokization and all of that we're going to sit there and go, okay, that's been a problem. We see it in the culture, we see it in politics, we see it. That going back to that, and I think it could lead to going to concerts. You know, we used to go to museums and we used to go to concerts and we used to, and I'm not talking just about, huge rock concerts and stuff like that. I'm talking about going to see, I'm a jazz musician, so I'm not just saying go see jazz, not per se. Going to the symphony. What's so terrible about that? It's spectacular. Spend the night. Again, having to stop, having to turn off the phone, or at least mute it, at least put it in your pocket, or at least not be dealing with it. And just deal with this thing. I think it's possible. I think it's the way out. We've put ourselves in this prison, an intellectual and an intellectual prison with technological walls. And the way to break out, and you sit there and go, wait a minute, we know how to do this. We've done it before. Now, some people haven't. Some of the younger generations probably haven't. But those of us who've been through it, we're even more to blame. We know. Being able to watch a film, sit and watch a film, and then talk about it afterwards without other distractions. Go to an art museum. Read a book. Listen to some spectacular music in your house on your excellent equipment. I think it makes for a healthier culture. And where there's a healthier culture, everything else comes from that. One of the reasons I think we're in the mess that we are now is we've decided that because you can't measure culture, culture therefore has no value. Because you can't measure the value of art, then art should not be supported. Because all that matters is money. So we have to push. Again, I don't think it requires a crusade. I don't have to, maybe we don't have to push. This is self-evident. It doesn't really require pushing. All it requires is if you dip your toe in, either because you've never been in those waters before, or you used to be in those waters and you've forgotten how good it was, and you go, oh, that's right, it's great. Yes. Yeah, I know, it's crazy. It's great. Go listen to some tunes. Go find some old school equipment and listen to some tunes. Go get a book. Go read. Or read on your phone. It's fine. It's fine to read, There's probably nothing quite so good, though, as actually having that tactile experience. Dealing with a book. Oh, I'll give you one. Speaking of tactile experiences. I have a notebook here while I work on my projects. This was given to me by my sister-in-law. I don't think she realizes how much I love this gift. It is a leather-bound book, blank pages, with handmade paper. Yeah, I've got some notes in here. Yeah, you probably can't see them, but there are notes in here. I love this thing, and I take notes. Oh, because I like to write out chords, on my Berkeley staff paper. Yay for the alma mater. And I tend to do that with a thing that's an incredible piece of technology. It's called a pencil. The whole thing's nuts. But, that's not to say, again, look, I use the tools. I love the tools. The tools are great. But it's nice to have a bit of a hybrid, and I think at least keep some connection. But it's not just nostalgia. And I think that's my point, is that the way out is to use our noodle. And if if we've gotten to a point where we're not using our noodle at all because the machines do everything for us, we need to be able, I think there's, look, use tools all the time, but you got to leave a little bit of space. You can't totally give yourself over to it. You've got to leave some space. That's how humans remain in charge, if humans are to remain in charge. We've got to get involved. We've got to sit and go, no, that's gone a little too far. I'm not saying backlash, but I'm saying course correction and go back a little bit. So how am I going to do that? Well, we all want to hit some magical home run and make the world a better place, right? But it doesn't work that way. So it starts like anything starts with single individual people saying, no, in my life, I won't do that. And I think reading, we need to read. I would put that before anything else. Books and reading would be my first suggestion. And then I think all these other things do come. And we need some sort of, a bit of an intellectual renaissance. We've gone to the brink. We need to back off from that and make it better. I really think that's about it. Let me just throw a couple other things at you, because the last time I was here, which was like, I think, a moon or two ago, I'd just gotten through a bit of a health crisis. I had a pulmonary embolism, which is to say blood clots all over my chest and around my heart. We think, because I have a whole team of doctors now, we think because of a long flight, 18-hour flight. I flew to the other side of the earth. I went to the Antipodes. I went to Singapore, which is an amazing place. But I flew over there and I flew back, and I had these blood clots in my legs, and they moved up to my chest. Really dangerous stuff. I'm living on blood thinners. But I was okay afterwards. But I'd definitely taken sort of a body blow, and I was definitely slowed down. The good news now is, I wouldn't say I'm 100%, but I'm definitely better than I was. I couldn't walk up a hill without really having a problem. I ran a marathon a long time ago, but I ran a marathon. So I used to be a runner, and I'm used to having some degree of conditioning. But now I'm walking like daily. I've lost, a little bit of weight, about 6 pounds in the past 10 days or so. That's good. So I'm starting to and I'm able to take these walks and feel a little better and so forth. So I'm getting healthier. So that's out there. Because it did come up, the last video really was about this. And I've decided that since I'm really busy writing tunes these days, that's really it. I'm really busy writing tunes, and I'm trying to get new tracks out every couple. I'm trying to get tracks that for me, just artistic me, to do. But there's also tracks I'm always doing stuff to working on the sync licensing world. So I'm always working. I've got a lot of work to do, and which doesn't give you a lot of time to do these. And I think it's fine that I do these every, bi-monthly. If that's when it can be, that's what it's going to be. So there's not a ton of you out there. So I'm doing this when I think there's something to say. So all of that. I'm trying to think what else. I was at No Kings in New York. I went down to that. Wasn't sure. I was a little careful about it because I think these things can be hijacked, possibly by political forces that I might not wish to be associated with. It's possible. But I was extremely impressed with how peaceful, and just how this wasn't some super left thing. It really wasn't. It was, in fact, I think the thing that surprised me was how mainstream it was. So the accusations coming from, you know, the other side, some of them I think are a large part of that is intentionally just making stuff up, because there's a lot of that going on. Because they can get away with intentionally making up stuff. There's no one, everyone's going to say it's fine. And then you've got a lot of folks who were never at it, don't know anything about it, but are just so paranoid, which is, always been a big part of the American psyche, that just so paranoid, they're convinced everything is a threat. You'd like to sort of grab these folks and remind them that, we're always given these lectures about the people who founded the nation. The founders of the nation were children of the Enlightenment. They were radically liberal. Certainly, they would be radically liberal now. They were certainly radically liberal in the context of their time. They were talking about overthrowing the divine right of kings, for crying out loud. I mean, they were proposing things. They wanted the separation of church and state badly. Again, because they were children of the Enlightenment. They had seen, they had taken their cues from the French. The French hadn't done their revolution yet, but, because they were too close to the monarchy, basically. The proximity was a bit of a problem. They were right there to tell you not to do things. But the ideas, all of that came out of, read your Voltaire, and understand that, this was a reaction to, the two things: the state that was just too strong, they were fighting against autocracy and the power of church. And they said both of those got to go. So, they were not, people always say they were patriots, but they weren't necessarily nationalists. They weren't in the business of saying our people are the best people in the world. They just wanted to be left alone and do their own thing. Anyway, so, we're told what the history was. And you go, well, wait a minute. Even a cursory examination of the history tells you exactly what they were. And they would have been appalled at what's going on now, because, especially done in their name, good God, that's not what they were about. Especially people like Adams, Hancock, some of those guys, they were not in favor of autocracy. Anyway, so that's where we are. I'm feeling a little better. If you want to go find my tunes, you have my name. You can go find the tunes. If you go and you hear it and you think something of it and you want to get a hold of me, get a hold of me. It's fine. I feel pretty good about it. I know what the piece is trying to do, and I think succeeds at. But it's different for me. It's a different direction for me, which I think is good. I thought we were supposed to continue growing. I thought that was the job. So we're doing that. Some people out there dig it. There are a few people who get it. That's cool. So we'll keep doing more stuff like that. I'm sure it'll be a moon or so. Now we're going to get very busy because we're going to get towards the end of the year, which always gets crazy. And but back to our top story tonight. Yeah, keep in mind. Think about reading. Think about physical media and the advantages that brings. And even if that's not forever, even if it's just a temporary thing to just get us out of the rut we're in, but I think we're due for that. Younger people, my son's generation, they're getting there first. They're sitting there looking at, they don't do Facebook. They're sitting there going, wow, that's a mess. It sure is. So I think they're going to get it. It'll manifest in some new way, but I think we can help them a little bit. We can give them a book. But I think that's our way out. Our way out is to wake up, use the little gray cells a little bit more. That's the way out. All right, you guys be safe, you be good, all that good stuff. And I will catch you all, when the time and inclination should all intersect in a pleasing way. Peace.